We are doing some exciting things in the chapter this year with new people on the board and fresh ideas and a lot of things going on. So we're very excited. Next month, Terry Shepard is going to be our guest, and he is going to be talking about creating diverse characters. So Terry is a publisher. He's from a publishing company, and it's going to be a good meeting next time. Tracy Tripp, is Tracy here? Tracy in the room? No. Tracy Tripp is a Sisters in Crime member that I met at a recent event, and she does blog interviews of authors. So if you have a book and you'd like to be interviewed, please let us know, and we'll connect you up with Tracy. She's got a good thing going on over there. So I thought that would be a great opportunity for everyone. So today I wanted to go over a couple of the advantages of being a paid member of this Northeast Florida chapter of Sisters in Crime. And now that we're working online, you can come in and be here from anywhere. And that's a big advantage. If you're a paid member of the chapter, you have to be a paid member of the national organization of Sisters in Crime, and then be a paid member of the chapter. The dues for the chapter is only $20 a year, and you can take care of that at our website, which is nefloridasistersincrime.org. Just go over there. You can pay right there online if you want to join. So the paid members are going to get a private email that is not posted in Facebook. Facebook is for everybody, but there will be a private email with these different things in it that go directly to paid members. We are getting set up to have a booth, a Sisters in Crime booth at writers' festivals and other events. So we have our banner and everything ready. And so if you are a paid member of the chapter and you want to join our booth, we'll let you have a space in our booth. So that's a big advantage. Just let us know. And we will be sending out announcements about events and so forth. Also, paid members can come in by Zoom. Now, this time we let everybody come in, but from now on, it'll be for paid members only, and the link will be going out to our paid members email list. So you can come in by email by Zoom if you want to. There is another one that is a brand new idea. It is cross-promotion teams. This is something that came to my attention recently, and that is 4, 5, 6 authors join together to cross-promote each other. It's amazing. So when one of them has a launch, everybody promotes the launch. When somebody posts on Facebook, everybody shares out to Facebook or whatever social media you're using. And also getting together once in a while to brainstorm and find out what everybody else is doing, get on the same page. I belong to one of these, and it is amazing, the support that you get. So if you are interested in that, being on a cross-promotion team, in the room here, let us know on Zoom, put it in the chat, and talk to each other. I mean, in the chat, if you want to connect with each other there, it doesn't have to be us organizing. Find somebody, get involved, and do it, because it's amazing. So, if you have any questions, you're welcome to contact me, and I'll talk about what we're doing. You can give each other book reviews, like, commenting, sharing on social media. And then when you have a special event, everybody can, participate in supporting you for your special event. Another advantage of being a paid member is speaking opportunities. Once in a while, we get things across the desk that are about people looking for speakers. And if you are a paid member and you want to be a speaker, let us know so we can put you on our list. Announcements about contests and conferences, and then discounts on special events. We are preparing right now, thank you, Shelley, for a one-day workshop in October. It's going to be a full day. We're hiring a speaker to come in, someone great, and it's going to be an amazing event here in Jacksonville. So paid members will get a discount. I think the discount's going to probably be more than your dues. So it's worth it to to join in. And so we're going to have book tables. We're going to have other things going on. It's going to be a full day conference, and stay tuned for more on that, because there'll be more details coming out as we get clear. And then before I turn it over to Lynda, I just want to say, Lynda, you have a gift card coming in the email. So watch out for your gift card before I forget to tell you about it. Now, Lynda, I am limited because I have your introduction on my computer, and I cannot go over there without compromising Zoom. So introduce yourself, my friend, and tell us who you are, and then take it away.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen because it kind of goes with, I can introduce myself with my second slide. So that'll work good. So do that really quick here.
Okay, I think that's as good as it's going to get. There you go. Good. Excellent.
Okay. Here we go. Wait. There we go. Okay. I always get nervous about that. So my name is Lynda Bergh. I am a licensed private investigator here in California. And a little bit about me. This is me. I was born and raised in Orange County, California. That's my three big brothers and I. And that picture is, like 60 years old, but we all pretty much look the same. I mean, as far as the stair step thing goes. My big claim to fame is I was the very first ever Little Miss Yorba Linda in 1965. That was the beginning and the end of my pageant career, because I really didn't like it. But I was supposed to be a ballerina. That was what that was my focus. It was what I was going to do. And when I was 17 and a half, I was accepted by the New York City Ballet Company. And during the 6 months before I was going to go to New York, I worked at my local police department doing a clerical job. And one night I got injured while working, which seems kind of tricky since I was typing reports, but there was something that was going on as I was arriving at the police department. An officer literally threw me to the ground for my safety and shattered my left kneecap, which ended the ballet career. So I ended up working in law enforcement for a few years. I told them they broke me. They were stuck with me. Did that for a little while. And then when I got out of law enforcement, I started a typing business, a home-based typing business. I've been working from home since 1981. So I guess I was kind of a trendsetter with that whole remote work thing. And by coincidence, my first 5 or 6 clients were private investigators. So I had not ever sought out working as a private investigator prior to that. So I kind of tend to say I fell into it. Had I not, been knocked down the police department, I would now be a retired ballerina. But I love my job. It's the best thing. It's so much fun. I own and operate LJB Investigations. I've been in the industry for 42 years and licensed for 27. I conduct pretty much any kind of investigation you can think of. I do asset searches, background checks, cyber crimes, dog bites, due diligence, elder abuse, fraud. Just started doing cellular forensics, which is really, really fun. Missing persons, missing kids, personal injury, online reputation, also really important, especially for writers. Someone's going to check you out a little bit and see who you are. It's good to know what's online about you. Cyber harassment, traffic accidents, slips and falls, social media, workers' comp, and more, which doesn't seem there could be more, but there is. My passion, however, lies in the fight against human trafficking with a focus on trafficking of children. I'm very much involved in that. So the kind of boring part here, requirements to be licensed in California, because that's where I am. We're also going to talk Florida. But we're licensed by the Department of Consumer Affairs, Bureau of Security and Investigative Services. In order to apply, you have to be 18, which is the same in every single state that requires licensing. Here you have to complete 6,000 hours of work for a licensed investigator, which is the equivalent of 3 years full-time. Or you can do 2 years full-time work and have a bachelor's degree in an applicable area like criminal justice or forensics. and then you pass an in-depth background check, and then you pass the private investigator exam. So when I took my test back in 1996, they weren't real gung-ho about having lady licensed PIs here. So you had to apply. It took me about 6 months between when I applied and when I received my notice of my test date, which I received 48 hours in advance of the test. Luckily, I was well prepared. I had worked for someone else for a long, long, long time, had the world's greatest boss, who was also a lady. But I got my test date, and they said, you have to be at this location, this time and place, and if you can't make it, you have to reapply and start over the process, which took 6 months. So I show up for the test, which was at the courthouse in downtown Los Angeles, and there's, maybe like 95-ish men there to take the test, and there's 3 ladies. And people are kind of chit-chatting before the test, and the guys all got their notice 6 weeks in advance. The girls all got it 2 or 3 days in advance. And we thought, well, that's interesting. How weird. And then they said, if you need to leave the room during the testing process, ladies can go one at a time. The ladies' room is 4 floors up. The men's room was literally right outside the test room, and they could go in groups. So, when a lady would leave to go to the ladies' room, they'd walk out and there'd be 5 or 6 guys there discussing answers and discussing questions. So that was the first time I really experienced being treated kind of less than because I was a female investigator. And interestingly, at that point, I had way more experience in training than pretty much every guy that was in that room. So that was, that's one spot that's different for being female. In Florida, the requirements are pretty similar to California. You guys have to obtain, as opposed to just working for 2 to 3 years underneath an investigator, you have to actually apply for what they call a Class CC license after taking a 40-hour course. So it's a little bit different, but pretty much everything is the same. And once you do that course and then get your CC license, then you work for 2 years under that license, and then you can take the test. And you guys are licensed by the Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services. So enough about that. So a lady in a man's world. In 1981, when I was first hired as an investigator, only about 10% of private investigators were women. My boss and mentor was amazing, wonderful. She was very well known in the industry because she'd been around for a really long time when I entered the scene. So she introduced me to a lot of really great investigators, pretty much all over the world. As of November 2023, which were the most recent stats I could find, 26.8 to 33.8 of PIs are female now, depending on who you ask. So we're still, there's not as many of us, not even close. Over the years, I've gone to many, many conferences. I love going to conferences. And the ratio of men to women there is easily 10 to 1, if not more. In the beginning, I went to a couple where there were 300 men and 5 or 6 women. And more than once, I've had a man walk up to me at a conference and say, is that your business? They look at your name tag and see your business name. And I say, yes. And they have actually said, does your husband let you do this? Which is hilarious. Like, really? And I say, yeah, he didn't have a choice. In 1996, here we go. Right after I got my license, I went to a conference in New Orleans, and that's where this guy was just hilarious about, he was stunned that there was a lady by herself who was married. I did have a wedding ring on, so he could tell that I was married, and, was stunned that not only did my husband allow me to have a business, but he allowed me to go to a conference by myself. Whatever. So, and while I'm talking, if anybody on Zoom, or I don't know if I can hear you in the room, if you have a question, it's okay with me if you unmute and ask the question. So I'm okay with that. Or we can wait till I'm done. Either way, this isn't going to go on very long, so then we can ask questions too. So real life PIs versus fictional PIs. What I do is absolutely not anything like what Kinsey Milhome did. She's my personal favorite PI character in books. about 98% of what she did was illegal. So while it's fun and it makes for a more entertaining read, I kind of like want to keep my license and want to stay out of jail. So I don't do what she did. Or what Philip Marlowe, Sam Spade, Magnum PI, Jim Rockford, Veronica Mars, or anybody else that plays a PI in books or TV, on movie or TV. Most of what they do is illegal. Several years ago, well, now like 15 years ago, I actually investigated a homeowner's claim that Tom Selleck had filed, and got to go out and meet him and interview him. And it was very, very funny because he said he'd never met a real life PI before. And I thought, don't they usually, I was like, don't you guys like research your roles a little bit? And he actually said, well, we were told that pretty much everything we were doing was illegal. So what was the point? So that was kind of fun. Just because of where I live, I've gotten to interview a lot of, so-called celebrities, a lot of TV and movie people. And that's kind of fun. The people that I've worked with, interestingly, they typically request a female investigator to go out to do those things. And this is why, let me get mine. Oops, there we go. This is why. These are the advantages of hiring a private investigator that's female. And before I go into this, I am not disrespecting the men. There's obviously tons of great male private investigators. I know some that have been investigators longer than me that will say that even though they really know their stuff and what they're doing, that females are better naturally at this job for many reasons. Number one is that we're less intimidating or threatening. I mean, I'm all of 5 feet tall. You can't tell with me sitting here, but I'm 5 feet tall. I'm a girly girl. When I started doing this, I was a little girly girl. So definitely not intimidating or threatening, although if I have to be, I can. Empathy and relatability. It's much easier to relate to a female than a male in a lot of cases. And we all know we're better listeners, right? Just saying. And usually more effective communicators. Versatility, I used to when I was out all the time in the field. I do more work in my office now than I did years ago. But I had a wig in my car, a hat, a quick change of clothes. There were all kinds of things. So, out in the field, we can change our appearance much easier than a lot of men can. Little side note, my husband is also a licensed private investigator, and he looks just like Guy Fieri. So when he's out working, I mean, people walk up to him all the time and tell him he looks like Guy Fieri. It's not, all in my mind that he looks like that. And so he's easy to spot. And when he's out working surveillance, he can't go up to a door and knock on the door to try to verify someone's home because they're going to recognize him and he won't be able to follow them. So, and it's really hard for him to change his appearance. He can put a hat on. It doesn't really make much of a difference. So it is a bit easier for us to change our appearance. It's also easier for us to infiltrate social circles. Not too terribly long ago, I had a child custody case where the mother had been ordered by the court not to indulge in adult beverages, shall we say, or any type of illegal substance 24 hours before she had custody of her kids. A reasonable request, I would think. But my client had found out that the street that she lived on was a little short cul-de-sac, and they were having block parties every other weekend. So they wanted me to try to get video of her at the block party. And I thought, okay. So I went to the neighborhood. I took my little doggie with me. His name's Mannix. He's back here in this little picture. And I took him for a walk down the street that night. And I was instantly invited to the party. A guy probably would not have been instantly invited to the party. So I sat there and I didn't get a lot of video because it was dark. I got some still photos that she happily posed for. But I was able to, do a great affidavit describing exactly what she did all night, including falling down drunk. We are also better at multitasking and paying attention to detail. Again, not disrespecting anybody, but it's a fact. And then observation. I'm I want to say we're kind of equal on observation, but intuition is huge in investigations. I use my intuition a lot, especially when I'm working on cases involving kids. And I don't know if it's because I've been doing this for so long, but I swear I investigate in my sleep these days, which sounds silly, but I'll go to bed with a case on my mind and I'll wake up at 3 a.m. with some brilliant idea for something I should do, or a reminder, excuse me, a reminder to not forget to do something that I need to add to the investigation. And so, and then my passion for protecting children. One of the very first cases I worked as an investigator involved a missing 10-year-old girl who'd been kidnapped by her uncle. And actually, it was a trafficking case. They didn't call it trafficking in those days, but that's exactly what it was. This little girl was raped multiple times by her uncle, who then sold her to his buddies for sex. We found her within a week, but oh my gosh, can you imagine what a long week that was for that little girl? Something that I do along with these cases is I stay in contact with the kids that I help rescue. I am friends with that little girl. So it's been, 42 years since we found her, and she and I are friends, and she's great. She's doing wonderful. She sometimes goes out and speaks about her experience. Not very often, but I don't know very many male investigators that stay in contact with witnesses or victims or people that they've worked with. People always ask me about my scariest experiences. And a couple of these, probably if it was a male, wouldn't have been quite the same. But when working workers' compensation cases, insurance companies want an investigator on scene like immediately, especially if it's a serious injury or a death that occurs on scene, which makes sense. The employers, however, instantly send the employees home. And so it becomes a bit of a challenge. So during my first month or so working as an investigator, I was sent out on what was allegedly an accidental death on a construction site. An iron worker had fallen from scaffolding. And it can happen. So I go out to the scene. Of course, the employees are gone. The main one I needed to talk to was the guy that had also been up on the scaffolding with the guy who fell. Well, I called that guy, and my boss had said, we need to get these as quickly as possible. And we have to remember, back in 1982, we didn't have cell phones. If I wanted to call my boss and check in, I had to go find a payphone somewhere or go to an office somewhere. So I just, took it upon myself to make sure that I scheduled everything and got everything done that day. Well, this main witness couldn't meet me till 10 o'clock that night in South Central Los Angeles. A very, very scary place for anyone to go at night, even today. But back then, very scary. But I did. I went to his house. And when I interviewed him, they wanted me to do a written statement. What I would do is I would interview him. I would handwrite his statement, what he was saying, and then have him read it, initial each page, and then sign it. So I'm asking my questions, and I get to the point where I say, so what happened? And he says, I killed that blankety, blankety, blank, because he sold me some bad, I can't remember what word he used now, but it was LSD that the guy sold him. So sold him bad drugs, so he killed him. And he said it very matter of fact, like you or I saying what kind of coffee we want or something. And my first thought was, I'm going to die in this house tonight. I am not going to make it out of here alive. So I have that in the back of my head. But I finished. I just kept writing. I asked a few more questions. I finished writing his statement. I handed it to him to read. And I thought, okay, this is it. Said a little prayer in my head. He actually just flipped through the pages, initialed them, and signed it, never looked at it. And then I left. I left his house. I have never moved as fast as I have once I got in my car. I think I drove, 100 miles an hour I went to the nearest police station, and I went inside with his statement and carried it up to the front desk, shaking like a leaf, and said, this guy just confessed to murder. Who can I talk to? And of course, the officers I talked to acted like I was nuts. They're like, what are you doing here? little white girl in a black neighborhood in the middle of the night in my little Fiero. They thought I was nuts. And I said, no, I'm a private investigator out here doing my job. Needless to say, my boss was not particularly happy with me the next day and told me never to do that again. But we got what we needed. And the look on the guy's face when we went to court, and I was the number one witness against him, was priceless. That guy got, I believe he got like 60 years in prison. Didn't get a life sentence, which was interesting. Got 60 years in prison. He's out, of course. And periodically sends me threats. So that's kind of a side part of the job, especially with the internet. I am all over social media, so it's not like I'm hard to find. And he kind of stalks me on there, but that's okay. He probably wouldn't do that to a man, but okay. So this is my normal day in the life. It's not that exciting. And this is, most of the investigators I know do the exact same thing I do when it comes to this. We wake up, usually without having enough sleep. I average 4 to 5 hours of sleep most nights. Have lots of coffee or tea because you require caffeine. Email checking, lots of email checking. This morning, I woke up to like 250 emails that were new, and they were not all for shopping. A lot were, but we make lots and lots of phone calls. I do try to communicate more via text and email if I can. I like to have things in writing, which is always a good idea. So I will, on clients, even when we start discussing cases, I go, you know what, we're going to switch to something in writing so that we have a written record of what we say or do. Lots of online research these days. On occasion, I go in person to the courts to get, court records, look up case files, things like that, check indexes. More and more of those are available online, which is kind of nice. But at the same time, even the online indexes aren't completely accurate. They don't always match the one that you go to the courthouse and look at their computer at the courthouse. So you would think it would be the exact same system, but it's not always. I do a lot of database research, document review, lots of paper shuffling. I have a stack on my desk right now about this big of paperwork on one file that I'm working on that I get to go through today. And then finally, report writing. You all are writers. I'm a writer too, but we're all writers, but I hate writing reports. Every investigator I know hates writing reports, but kind of has to be done. We have to document what we've done and how we did it. So it's not all boring and routine like that sounded. A couple case examples over the years. The most valuable smoking gun I've ever found on a case saved my client $10 million. And it was on a simple traffic collision case. The guy he was from Irvine, California. He was on vacation in Canada and got rear-ended. It was a very minor accident. There was, like the bumpers got dented. It was kind of nothing. He claimed he had whiplash and thought brilliantly, okay, not so brilliantly, that somehow he was going to get like, $10 million for this injury. And I guess he thought since he lived in a different country, he could get away with it. Well, the insurance company hired me to follow him and see what he was doing because he claimed he couldn't go to work. He had a 3-year-old son and said he couldn't play with his son anymore and he couldn't help his wife around the house, just all this stuff. So we did surveillance. And the second day that we did surveillance, we saw him out at the park with his son. And this little 3-year-old was a big 3-year-old. And he's throwing him up in the air and swinging him around by his arms and having a great day, doing all these things he claimed he couldn't do. And so I thought, okay, we nailed it. We're good. Sent the evidence to the client in Canada, and this guy's attorney turns around and says, oh, well, that was just a one-time thing. It was just one of those days he was feeling good that day. So they sent us out to follow him some more. Well, we must have done 80 hours of surveillance on this guy, and every single time we got him doing things he claimed he could not do. So finally, his attorney comes back and says, okay, well, the week before he was in this accident, my client was offered a job where he was going to be paid like 4 times more than what he's making now. So he's lost all this money because of this accident. And so my client calls me and says, all right, I don't know how we're going to do this, but see if you can find a contract. Supposedly there was a proposal or a contract offering this guy this job. So I put on my Google hat and dug in online. And on page 27 of the Google results for this company, I found the proposal. And in the proposal was an offer to this guy to work for them as an engineer on their case for less money than he was making. It was actually going to be a cut in pay. So that right there is what they used in court and saved my client $10 million. And what's really cool in Canada, when you lose your civil case on a workers' comp thing, you have to pay all the legal fees for the other side. So that guy who tried to scam the system actually had to pay all kinds of money back to the insurance company and the attorneys who represented the insurance company. So that was fun. The worst injury I've ever sustained as a private investigator was a slashed thigh following service of a subpoena. And what happened on that, I did go out with a partner who was a former FBI agent. He insisted on driving, and he didn't want to go to the door and serve the papers. We went to this guy's house in LA. And so I went up to the door and served the papers and then walked away. I'm walking back to the car, and the guy literally starts chasing me to the car. So I run and jump in the car. The guy reached out and, slashed my thigh. And then we took off. Luckily, I wasn't by myself. Normally, I did those things by myself, so that could have been much worse. Needless to say, I didn't work with that particular investigator again, going out serving subpoenas, because, the man should have been the one that went to the door. The only accident I've ever been in while driving around on the job happened when my then boss's next door neighbor ran a stop sign and hit me. So that was funny. I was driving, 1,000 miles a week, driving all over Southern California, and I get in an accident when my boss's next door neighbor hits me. So, I don't know if that's lucky driving for me or what, but kind of ironic that happened. I do a lot of asset searches, and we do those I try to get attorneys to hire me before they file a lawsuit against someone, so that if they win the lawsuit and they get a big, huge settlement, multi-million-dollar settlement, there's actually something they can collect on. Unfortunately, a lot of them wait, and we do the asset search afterwards, and the person doesn't own anything except a car. And so there's nothing to collect on. But I once did a case for one of my brothers was an attorney. He did banking law mostly, but one of the banks he worked for had a customer that filed bankruptcy, and they had, tens of millions of dollars in debt the guy was trying to write off, but he had a very lavish lifestyle. And so I was hired to look into him. And first of all, the guy was a professional poker player. So, and on those things, every single thing they do is online. You can just search the person's name, because they brag about their wins and they whine about their losses. So I found that he was playing poker, but that wasn't really enough for them to really use against him in court. So as I dug into his other assets, I found just about $250 million in assorted properties and business interests that this guy had transferred to his long lost cousin. He didn't have any cousins. But anyway, so he illegally transferred this stuff, and he did it all after he filed bankruptcy. So it was very clear he was doing it to hide it. He hadn't listed any of it in his bankruptcy filing. So that guy's in federal prison. So that was fun. But the most gratifying work I do is finding and rescuing missing and trafficked kids. Definitely. I do a lot of speaking, both via Zoom and in person, about, training people. Wow, you can't tell I talk, huh? Educating parents and kids, teachers, faith-based leaders, anybody on how to protect kids from predators. That's my huge, huge focus. So that is technically my presentation at this point. I'm going to put this little screen up that has my contact info. And does anybody have any questions? Like, ask away. Anyone?
Hello.
Hi.
My question is, you were talking about your day in the life tasks. How has that changed in the last, say, 10 or 15 years, as far as the online research and digital searching and things like that?
Well, I always say that the internet is a blessing and a curse when it comes to my job. It used to be if I wanted to go find court records, I had to go to the courthouse. So a lot of that stuff now is online. But like I said, it's not always accurate or complete. So that's different. I can't really rely on that completely. The internet's a really good starting point. In the last, I want to say 5 years, there's been a couple companies that have come up with databases for social media searches, which are great. They're great jumping off points. I don't do anything entirely electronic. If I find something that's online, I take steps to get back to the original source to verify the information I find. For instance, Truth Finder. Everyone knows what Truth Finder is, right? You pay $39.95 or whatever it is to get an initial background report, or what they call a background report on somebody. Probably 8 times out of 10, information that's on there is inaccurate. So it's not always the right person. There'll be things intermixed between 2 people or 3 people that have a similar name. For many, many years, when you Googled my name, it looked like I was a convicted meth dealer, because there was another Lynda. There was a Lynda C. Bergh. Mine's Lynda J. Bergh, but with the same date of birth in LA, who was a convicted meth dealer. And that you'd search Lynda Bergh, she would pop up. And she looked a lot like me too, which was weird. Our date of birth is the same. So if someone didn't go beyond what they just saw online, they could have assumed that was really me. So it can be a plus, it can be a minus. The case that I talked about where I found the contract online, that never would have happened any other way. So that's where, Google was great for that. And that's because so many people put those things online. Seems kind of silly. I wouldn't put a contract online, but a lot of people do. So some things are easier and some things are harder. It's a terrible answer, but it just depends. But either way, we have to do our work. I have to go back and I have to verify everything that I find online to make sure it's the right person, that it's complete and accurate.
Thank you.
Of course.
We have a question in the room.
Okay.
Do you have to have a license to carry a gun?
I do have to have a license to carry a gun. I have one, but I don't carry most of the time. And because it's a huge responsibility to carry a gun. So if I'm not going somewhere where I think there's a chance of me being in danger, I do not carry it. And in California, I have to have an additional license specific along with my PI license to allow me to carry. So even though I have a concealed carry permit outside of being an investigator, in order to carry while I'm working, I have to have the secondary license, which is kind of ridiculous, but they make us do that.
You know how to handle it.
Any other questions here? Yes.
I have a question.
Sure.
Actually, I have multiple questions, Lynda. Amazing presentation, but I'll start with this. Excuse me. How do you go about finding a kid who's been taken for trafficking? What's the process you go through?
Oh my gosh, there's so many ways actually. My favorite, for lack of a better word, way to do it is that unfortunately here very close by where I live, there's a hotel row. It's about 25 minutes south of me, in San Clemente. Right along the freeway, there's a row of hotels, and it's a known trafficking spot. So a couple of my investigator buddies and I, when we have nothing better to do on a weekend night, we'll actually go hang out in the parking lot at that hotel. And we have found many children that way. Other than that, and that's just we happen to know where to go, but other than that, I often get hired to look for missing kids. And a lot of kids that run away end up being trafficked, or they get contacted very, very quickly, like within 24 to 48 hours by someone who tries to traffic them. So most of my rescues are from cases like that, where a parent hired me to find their kid that usually ran away to go meet someone that they met online. The internet's a very bad place for that.
Okay.
So, yeah.
How about surveillance then? Can you talk about surveillance a little bit? What that
Sure.
process is like?
Sure. Personally, I try not to do surveillance because I hate it, because it's mostly boring, but it's all my husband does. And for surveillance, we get hired by all kinds of people. I try not to follow cheating spouses, because those cases are so frustrating and they're so expensive for the client, and then usually nothing happens with it. So, we can spend hours and hours and hours following someone, and the client goes, oh, okay. And they just stay together, and 6 months later, they want to hire us again. So I avoid those cases. But we do get hired to follow people that are claiming they were injured, like in a car accident, injured on work, things like that. And there's all kinds of, laws and rules for that. We can't, for instance, we'll get a case where someone's known to hang out in their backyard and party, or that they're known to be doing, woodworking in their backyard. Well, you can't do video of them in their backyard because they have an expectation of privacy. So we have to be very careful, just like we can't, if we can stand on the sidewalk and we can see what they're doing without climbing a pole or a tree or whatever, if they have an open fence, we could do video. But if they have like a wood fence or a brick fence, and you can't see it without, reaching over or climbing up or something, you cannot do video, which makes sense for them and makes sense for most people, but it's very frustrating when you're an investigator, when they're doing something. But another frustrating part is following people in traffic. It's really hard to do a rolling surveillance on somebody, especially in like Los Angeles traffic. Orange County, where I am, is not as bad, but in traffic, it's hard. And you kind of hope they don't notice you. Personally, this is kind of ironic, but I drive a bright red car, and my license plate says she spies. I just got that a few years ago. So I don't normally do surveillance in that vehicle, obviously, but I have, and the people did not notice me. That, or they thought, oh, it's a woman in a red car, she wouldn't be following me. So it's kind of like hiding in plain sight. So that's fun. My husband's vehicle is, gray, it blends in, and so it's obviously easier for him to follow someone for, long periods of time, as long as they don't notice him, because he looks like Guy Fieri. So yeah, it just depends. We get assignments where the people live inside a gated community, and we can't legally go in there and do surveillance. So you have to sit outside the gate and hope you see them leave. So you can literally sit for 8 hours and never see a thing. So there's challenges for sure. It can be an adventure. Most of the time, surveillance is very boring.
Thank you. I'll let somebody else ask questions, and then I'll come back and ask you more questions.
Okay, I love that.
We have two questions here in the room.
Okay.
I was just wondering, how does your work parallel with the law enforcement investigator?
So the question is, how does your work parallel a law enforcement officer?
It's very similar. There are things that I can legally do that police officers can't do. And there are things that obviously police officers can do that I can't legally do. So we can complement each other. On missing kid cases especially, I like to work with law enforcement, especially if it's a trafficking case. Most of the time they're open to working with us, which it did not used to be that way. It used to be they thought we were all a bunch of flakes that didn't know what we were doing. And I would say in the last 20 years or so, law enforcement has been a bit more open to working with private investigators. And part of that's due to manpower. They don't have enough manpower to keep up with a lot of what they need to do. And like I said, there's things that I can legally do. I had a very dear friend who was a homicide detective who would contact me 3 or 4 times a week and ask me to run database searches on witnesses. And he'd say, I can't get authorization at the department to do this. So he would hire me as a private citizen to find these people. And that way we got around that, and he could get the information to locate witnesses on cases. So I don't know how much of that gets done, but he and I did that a lot. And it worked. So it just depends. It's kind of, we used to say it was a love-hate relationship. When they want us, they want us. And when they don't, they don't. But it's gotten much better. We work together a lot more.
Okay, second question.
Oh, I was wondering, what's the average cost to to buy access to a database that you obviously have to qualify for?
What is the average cost to get access to a database that you have to qualify for?
Yeah, we pretty much sign our lives away to get access to a database. The fees aren't that bad once you get the access. My average, I spend about $250 a month on database fees, so it's not that bad. And, obviously you either get reimbursed from the client for that or it's a business expense. So it's really not, it's not too bad. There are companies that spend thousands and thousands of dollars on them because all they do is, background checks or something, and you run database on every single person on that. So it can get costly. It depends on the type of work that you do.
Yes, go ahead.
I took some criminal justice courses, and I still have my big fat rules of evidence textbook. And I bet you almost have to memorize that, don't
We have to memorize a lot. I mean, I was in law enforcement for a few years, and so I had to memorize all of that when I was in law enforcement, and not much has changed over the years. So yeah, there's a lot that we have to know, criminal law, and then we also have to know civil law, which most law enforcement doesn't need to know. So there's, we have to know all of the areas or know where to find what we're looking for. I'm very good at researching and finding what I need, especially when it comes to laws. Because, I don't want to go to jail. I don't want to lose my license. So yeah, we have to know a lot.
Any other questions?
Yeah,
Yes.
I'll ask another question. You mentioned the conferences that you like to go to. Have you ever run into mystery writers at those PI conferences?
Well,
and can you suggest one?
Well, this is funny. Many years ago, Sue Grafton was like the keynote speaker at a conference. And she's no longer with us, unfortunately, but I was so freaking excited to meet her because she was a riot. And I loved her books. And, she would stand up and say, this is how not to be a real private investigator, because that was true. And then I'm trying to think. The last one, I can't think of the guy's name. I was at a conference in Las Vegas a few years ago, and I'll have to look up the name and send it to you guys. But the person wrote firsthand, actually, about all kinds of stuff having to do with the mob, back in the day. And he had done some, fictionalized versions and then some not so fictionalized versions of his adventures with, Frank Sinatra and all those people in the mob. He was probably the most fascinating. Like,
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I would say he was supposed to speak for 20 minutes and he spoke for like 3 hours because we kept asking questions.
Can you suggest a conference to go to if we're interested in doing something like that?
The best way to find one, my favorite ones are ones that you have to be a member of the association to go, but there are private investigation conferences. I wonder, there's one in October in Las Vegas called Osmosis Con. And I think you can get into that one. And it's more about, how to track things down and track people down and investigate people online. which these days, obviously, very timely. It's their 10th one. I went to the first one. Now I'm going to go to the 10th. And then there's every state. I think the Florida Association of Private Investigators has a conference coming up, and I'm sure you can get into that. So just Google, it's FAPI, Google FAPI conference, and you'll find the information. And that way it's close for you guys that are in Florida. But they happen periodically throughout the year, and any, state conference is good. And they love having people like writers at them and stuff, just because it's fun. It's not a bunch of investigators sitting there telling, war stories to each other. You tell somebody else our stories.
Well, that leads me to another question for you, which is, have you ever been on vacation, just, not working and gotten enmeshed in a crime or a possible crime and just like become the amateur sleuth?
I never go on vacation. Every vacation I go on has a conference attached, which is my fault. I do that kind of on purpose, but since I'm licensed in California, I'm really only allowed to physically investigate in California. So if I was on vacation somewhere else, then I would have to, connect with a licensed investigator in that state to get involved, which I would do in a second. But I really tend to not go on vacations. I probably should someday, but I just add a couple days on either end of a conference that I go to and call that my vacation.
You really ought to give it a try.
I should. I know.
But thank you. Thank you.
Of course.
Any other questions at all? Anyone online or here in the room? This has been awesome, Lynda.
Thank you. And if anybody wants to connect with me on LinkedIn or I'm all over social media, you just search my name, you can find me. So if you have questions or come up with something and, want an idea, an explanation, anything, feel free to contact me.
Thank you so much.
Of course.
Yes.
It was fun being here. Thanks for having me.
This is so fascinating. And we have a room full of people here. We've got 16 people in the room. So, yeah, this has been great. I really appreciate your expertise and your humor. It's a non-humorous topic, but yeah, that's
We try. I like I said, I do these 3.5-hour long workshops on how to keep kids safe. Talk about, every now and then we have to tell a joke or say something because it's also such heavy information. So yeah, you gotta make it fun.
Where could we, do you have something online about that particular topic that you could give us that would, if someone wants more information?
They can find, I don't have anything specifically published. I list my, Facebook's the best way to find out what I'm up to. And I do post my, my workshops and things on Facebook. So it's either LJB Investigations or Lynda J. Bergh Herring. I do it on both, and I post it on my LinkedIn. So that's really the best way.
Okay.
And then I do have something that I can email you and you can distribute it. I have a list of the top 10 ways to keep your kids safe online that I do. So,
yeah, maybe we could put that in the Facebook group.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely.
Anything? Nothing more? Okay. Well, I think we're complete, and just many thanks, and we'll definitely be talking to you again. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Sounds good. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you for coming.
Of course. Thanks.